The atmosphere in Providence Municipal Court is usually routine. Parking tickets, minor violations, ordinary people dealing with ordinary problems. But that Tuesday morning the air felt different, heavy, charged. The kind of tension you feel before a storm breaks. The gallery was full, not with defendants waiting their turn, but with reporters, camera operators, and men in dark tailored suits who had no business being in a municipal courthouse. Power had entered the room before the defendant ever did. Then the double doors opened. Julian Sterling walked in, 21 years old, heir to the Sterling hedge fund empire, a young man whose weekly allowance could fund this courthouse for a year. He didn't walk, he strutted. Italian suit, sunglasses indoors, gum in his mouth. 5 high-priced attorneys behind him, 4 private security guards flanking him like royalty. He looked less like a defendant and more like a CEO arriving to acquire a company he already owned. The smirk on his face told me everything. This wasn't fear. This wasn't concern. This was entitlement. Julian Sterling believed laws were optional for people like him. But what struck me most wasn't his wealth. It was who he ignored. Sitting quietly in the front row was Arthur Miller, 72 years old, retired janitor. A man who had spent 50 years cleaning the floors of buildings owned by Julian's father. Arthur's arm was in a sling, his face bruised. The visible reminders of the night his 2004 Honda Civic was crushed by Julian's $2 million McLaren. Arthur looked small, defeated, like a man who had already been told without words that he didn't matter. The charges before me were serious: reckless endangerment, destruction of property, leaving the scene of an accident, and attempted bribery of a public official. According to police reports, Julian never asked if Arthur was alive, never called an ambulance. Instead, he threw a roll of $100 bills at a bleeding old man and told officers, "My time is worth more than his life." Now he stood before me, leaning casually against the defense table, while his attorney began to speak before I even opened the file. But I wasn't watching the lawyer. I was watching Julian. He was pulling a checkbook from his jacket with theatrical ease, like he was settling a dinner bill. "All rise," the bailiff announced. I took my seat and adjusted my glasses. I knew something Julian didn't. This wasn't a marketplace. "Mr. Sterling," I said calmly, "you are charged with reckless endangerment, destruction of property, and attempted bribery. Remove your sunglasses and put the checkbook away. This is a courtroom." Silence. Julian slowly removed his glasses, but he didn't put the checkbook away. He opened it, clicked his pen, and smiled at me. "Mr. Sterling," I said again, firmer now, "I will not ask you twice." He sighed like an annoyed executive. "Your Honor, Frank, can I call you Frank?" He leaned forward. "Let's be efficient. My lawyer charges $1,500 an hour. This court costs taxpayers thousands a day. Let's close the gap." He began writing. The scratching of that pen echoed through the courtroom. His attorney whispered urgently, trying to stop him. Julian shrugged him off. "Rip." The sound of the check tearing free was sharp and deliberate. He slid it forward. $50,000, he announced. "For the car, the medical bills, and a donation. We drop this, I make my flight to Saint-Tropez, and everyone wins." Arthur Miller shrank into himself, gripping his hat. To Julian, this wasn't justice. It was a transaction. I looked at the check, then at Julian. "Mr. Thorne," I said to his attorney, "your client has just committed a felony in open court." Julian laughed. "Felony? Come on, it's a settlement. If 50 isn't enough, say the number. Everyone has a price." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Julian Sterling had said the quiet part out loud. "You believe money makes you immune to accountability," I said. "You believe the law bends for your convenience." Julian checked his watch. "My father buys politicians," he said flatly. "He buys laws. If this is a problem, I'll make a call." That was the moment. "Bailiff," I said, "seize the check as evidence. Trial begins now." Julian blinked. For the first time, confusion flickered across his face. "Entertain me," he muttered. The prosecutor called Arthur Miller. It took Arthur time to reach the stand. Every step hurt. He clutched his hat like armor. When he spoke, his voice shook. He described the crash, the glass, the smell of gas, the fear that his car would explode. He described begging for help, and how Julian threw money at his face and walked away. The courtroom was silent. Arthur explained that without his car he couldn't take his wife to dialysis, that the pain wasn't just physical. It was the way he looked at me, Arthur said quietly, like I wasn't human. A snort broke the silence. Julian Sterling was laughing. Dialysis? He muttered. Just buy a new car. This is pathetic. I froze. Mr. Sterling, I said softly, repeat that. He did, louder. I did him a favor. That Honda was trash. He should be thanking me. Arthur began to cry. I told him gently to step down. Then I turned fully toward Julian Sterling. Stand up, I said. He didn't. The bailiff stepped forward. Julian stood, annoyed. Explain to me, I said, how nearly killing a man is a favor. Julian shrugged. Economics. I offered him 50 grand. That's ROI. I upgraded his life. And the pain? I asked. The trauma? His wife? Collateral damage, Julian said instantly. That word told me everything. He didn't see people, only obstacles. Your Honor, his lawyer stammered, I advise my client. I don't need silence, Julian snapped. I can buy this building. He turned back to me. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, I said calmly. You've never earned $1 in your life. He scoffed. We don't earn, we own. I picked up his driving record, tickets, dismissed charges, checks written. Fines are not service fees, I said sharply. They are punishment. Julian laughed. We're not equal, he said, pointing at Arthur. I'm a predator. He's prey. That's when his smile died. You're not a predator, I said quietly. You're a parasite. His face flushed red. I'll destroy you, he spat. Take the money or I end your career. I looked at him steadily. You've spent your life opening doors with checks, I said. Today you meet one that's locked. I closed the file. Mr. Sterling, I announced, I find you guilty of reckless endangerment, guilty of destruction of property, guilty of attempted bribery and intimidation of a judicial officer. Julian reached for his checkbook. Fine, what's the number? There is no fine, I said. Confusion washed over his face. A fine only punishes the poor, I continued. For you, it's permission. I leaned forward. So I'm taking what you value. For reckless endangerment and destruction of property, 6 months. His jaw dropped. For bribery and intimidation, 2 years. Pandemonium erupted. No deals, I said, no donations. Bailiff, I ordered, take him into custody. Julian backed away, panic replacing arrogance. You can't do this, he screamed. I'm Julian Sterling. The cuffs clicked shut, and for the first time Julian Sterling was powerless. Arthur Miller stood silently, breathing deeply. The doors closed, silence returned, balance restored. The doors had barely closed when the storm began. Julian Sterling screamed as the bailiff led him away. Threats, promises, names I was supposed to fear. I'll have your badge. My father owns judges. You'll regret this. I didn't look back. I had learned long ago. A courtroom is the last place power should feel comfortable. Within hours, my chambers were flooded with calls. Private numbers, unknown numbers, numbers that expected to be answered. By sunset, the headlines were everywhere. Billionaire heir jailed by municipal judge. Checkbook justice fails in Providence. Judge refuses payoff, sends Sterling's son to prison. Julian's father called before midnight. I didn't pick up. His attorneys filed an emergency appeal at dawn. Denied. They claimed judicial bias. Denied. They claimed disproportionate sentencing. Denied. They claimed I was making an example. I was, but not the way they meant. The next morning, Arthur Miller returned to court, not as a witness, but as a man who suddenly mattered. People recognized him. Strangers shook his hand. Someone paid for his cab home. By noon, a local news station aired his story. By evening, donations poured in. $10, $20, $5. Not from hedge funds, from teachers, nurses, mechanics, people who saw themselves in Arthur. Within 48 hours, Arthur's totaled Honda was replaced. Within a week, his wife's dialysis transport was permanently funded. No billionaire wrote those checks, human beings did. Meanwhile, Julian Sterling met reality. Prison doesn't care about last names. The guards didn't bow, the inmates didn't recognize privilege. His attorneys tried to negotiate house arrest. Rejected. They offered donations to charities. Rejected. They offered to fund a new courthouse wing. Rejected. Money kept knocking. Justice didn't answer. Julian's first week inside was a shock. No private room, no special meals, no immunity. The man who believed everyone had a price learned something else. Some people don't sell. At the sentencing review hearing, Julian stood differently. No smirk, no sunglasses, just anger, raw and confused. He blamed everyone but himself. The judge wanted attention, he told reporters. This was political. But something interesting happened. The more he spoke, the quieter the room became. People weren't listening anymore. The illusion had shattered. Power only works when people believe in it. Then came the final appeal, filed with the state's highest court. They argued precedent. They argued influence. They argued wealth as mitigation. The ruling came back unanimous. Sentence upheld. The written opinion ended with a line I will never forget. Wealth is not a shield. Intimidation is not advocacy. And the integrity of this court is not for sale. Julian Sterling served his time, not quietly, not gracefully, but fully. Arthur Miller never asked for revenge. He never celebrated. When a reporter asked him how he felt, he said something simple. I just wanted to be treated like a person. That sentence mattered more than any verdict I delivered. Months later, Arthur sent me a letter, handwritten, careful. It thanked the court, not for punishment, but for dignity. I sleep better, he wrote, not because he went to prison, but because someone finally said no. That's what courts are for, not to crush the powerful, not to elevate the weak, but to remind everyone. The law does not belong to the highest bidder. It belongs to all of us. And sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a locked door that money can't open.